business owners or opportunities for you. So we'll talk about some of these things here. We have an Oaksterdam panel, so we have some very, very experienced individuals here, so hopefully we can cover all of your questions. To introduce to you who we have here, all the way on the end here to my left, we have Ariel Clark. Now she's a business attorney. She actually has an office here in Los Angeles as well as the San Francisco Bay Area. She again is a business attorney. So if you have questions or you want to learn about things as it relates to a business or business opportunity, Ariel's here to answer those questions. And what happens if you get into trouble? Okay, that's why we have Meital here, Meital Manzuri. She's a criminal defense attorney that does business as well. She has an office here in Beverly Hills, and next to Meital we have Jeff Jones. Now Jeff Jones has been around for a very long time. He actually started one of the first dispensaries right here in the state of California. He was actually one of the first people that was also prosecuted or taken to court all the way to the Supreme Court. So he has a lot of experience with dispensaries, cultivation. He's been in the industry for about at least 20 years. I happen to be honored to be Provost and Dean of Faculty for Oaksterdam University, so I'm here to answer some questions as well. For those of you that might not know about Oaksterdam University, briefly let me just discuss this with you. We're America's very first cannabis college. We actually opened in 2007, and in fact, this is Oaksterdam's, the university's 10-year anniversary this year. So 10 years educating people, thank you, we do appreciate it. Oh, by the way, I'm sure we have, thank you, we appreciate it. I'm certain there's some OU graduates in here as well, so we always love to see our alumni. Speaking of which, we're very proud to say that we've graduated well over 30,000 students from over 30 countries. And the reason I bring that up is it goes to show you that the interest is international. The opportunities are also international. This is not just within our own borders. Drug policy reform is happening worldwide, and so we're really excited to share a lot of this information with you. I want to share another thing. We've been training students for well over 10 years. Entrepreneurs, grandmothers, college graduates, but now a lot of regulators taking classes. So we're very proud to say that in the last few months that we have trained the Board of Equalization, which is the largest taxation body in the entire country, the American Bar Association, the Florida Department of Health. Oaksterdam also evaluates a lot of medical marijuana license applications. I can't mention which states we do that for, but it's exciting, and it goes to show you that the regulators are taking classes now because they realize that their opinion doesn't necessarily matter. They realize this is happening, it's coming, what do we need to do about it? Which is exciting because it's progressive for you. That means a lot more doors are going to open. Keeping in mind that today is also a very historic day in that we were going to have some government changes nationwide. I'm talking about in the White House. And so we'll talk about some of those things and how that relates to you. So again, if you have questions, let me know. Other than that, we are going to start talking about what happened recently as we are here in California. Let's talk about Prop 64 and how it just passed for adult use. So let's talk about that a little bit and start with some of those questions here. So in regards to Prop 64, it's adult use, and what does that mean for you? So I want to talk to our experts here. As we talk about Prop 64 and as it's passed for adult use, what does that mean in a business perspective? What does that mean liability-wise in regards to a criminal defense attorney? What does that mean in regards to opening a dispensary or a cultivation site? What are your challenges? What are some of the concerns moving forward? So let's start with Ariel, if you don't mind. Let's talk about Prop 64. So what does that mean for everybody down here? What opportunities are there for them? Compliance. There's a lot of ways that we can go in that direction.
Well, so here we are, all of us, in the state of California, which is 49% of the entire national cannabis market. It's a $6.6 billion industry here, both medical and recreational. We are here in Los Angeles, which is the biggest market and the biggest market in the world, and it's really kind of incredible. With the passage of the recreational marijuana AUMA Prop 64, the first commercial sale will not happen any earlier than January 1st, 2018. So that's the target date that the state hopes to have the recreational licensing and program come online. What we will be seeing is that, of course, last January, as mentioned, the state passed the Medical Cannabis Regulation and Safety Act, which is the medical regulatory program, which is not yet in effect. That we hope for licensing and rules and regulations by that same date, January 1st, 2018. And as people may know, for the last, really since 1996 in the state of California, we've had medical marijuana. But it's been largely unregulated, so that's been an interesting challenge for businesses to operate. And so you need to, and as a business and corporate lawyer working with cannabis businesses, still we need to operate within this nonprofit collective model, have very proper corporate structuring, transactional internal compliance work done, and then looking forward to understanding the timeline of all of this, because as we move closer to 2018, we know from the governor's budget bill and certain directives and statements made by Lori Ajax, who's the marijuana czar, that the state really is looking at reconciliation of both programs, so that hopefully we will have licensing by January 1st, 2018. And what that also means, just to highlight some different issues that everybody needs to be looking at, is it's a two-tiered licensing process. And in the state of California, we really care about local control. And there are 58 counties and 482 cities in the state of California. And you will need a permit for your particular cannabis business in one or all, as many of those as you want to operate. And right now, I would say probably 95% of those cities and counties, you can't get a business permit. But that's in the queue. So the adult use model certainly triggered local governments looking at these issues and saying, holy shit, yes, cannabis is here. All right, what are we going to do about it? Do we want to participate in this industry? To what extent? Do we want to enjoy the revenue, et cetera? So it's a really exciting time as someone who's worked with these sorts of businesses for over 10 years, really since graduating from law school at Berkeley. And that's kind of the birth of the industry. It feels like, man, I've been doing this for a long time, and yet at the same time, we're kind of just at the beginning. So, yeah, nice to see everyone.
Fantastic. Do you have any questions so far?
So the question was, what is that there have been a lot of dispensaries in the city of Los Angeles, because there was a reference made to being pre-ICO, which just deals with the city of Los Angeles, so you have federal, state, and local, right? And a lot of these dispensaries being shut down in the city of Los Angeles, and advice for folks who are, I think you said, on the edge of their seat. Well, I can tell you that in the city of Los Angeles, there will be a ballot measure, Measure M, on March 7th that will go to the voters. And we voters, if we vote in the city of Los Angeles, will determine whether we want to tax this industry, whether we want the city council, after a public permitting or a public review process where hopefully everyone who lives in LA will weigh in on this. So this would be an opportunity for those dispensary operators to communicate with city council and other people in the industry in order to help fashion this local permitting process and rules and regulations. Target date set forth in Measure M is by September 30th of this coming year. So people really need to get involved. I say this over and over to my clients and across the state of California. Get involved with your local governments. It's incredible what one is able to accomplish when you do this. Last February, I founded the Los Angeles Cannabis Task Force. We accomplished an incredible amount. I worked with Meital on some of these issues and other people in the room. And in the city of Los Angeles, it's really been wonderful that largely, of course, within the industry, there are certainly always differences because we are adults and that's how the world works. And hopefully we can continue to converse about these issues well and in a constructive manner so we can really create a fair process here in the city of Los Angeles. But it really does require in every city and county here to get involved. So that's my big thing. I rah speech every day. Please get involved with your local government, with your local association, with statewide cannabis organizations. We really have a lot of power and there's a lot of information that can be shared through those forums.
What to do if the county I'm in, which is Kern, doesn't allow a manufacturing license?
So here's the question. What to do if the county that one is located does not, as of yet, allow a particular type of license, specifically manufacturing of the volatile sort or non-volatile? Well, here's the thing. This is where political sort of strategy and creating relationships with other people in the industry and with your local government, with your county supervisors, with various folks in the community comes into play. A lot of these counties, look, most cities and counties were waiting to see if the recreational or adult use would pass before they even wanted to deal with these issues, because it really is about, where do we utilize our resources? The medical and recreational programs are very similar. And so now it's sort of like, think about it, like these city and county officials are sitting there and they've got a roster of stuff to deal with, and one of them is cannabis. And so now they're looking at these issues. So again, I would say, even though they may say now we're not interested in that particular type of license or permit, right? Because the cities and counties give permits, the state gives license, just for clarification. So in order to apply to the state in the future, you'll need to have a permit from your city or county for the particular type of cannabis business activity, cultivation, manufacturing, dispensary, distribution, transportation, whatever it may be. And then it really is about creating that relationship with the county. So it may be, working with an association, maybe working with a local group, a statewide group. Maybe it's also working with, someone who understands how to communicate with those government folks. I mean, I often say, though, it is you that the city and county will give the permit to. So, there's sometimes an idea of you need to hire some very expensive lobbyist or consultant to make that relationship. And, there's that, of course, those folks have value, but ultimately it really is about you, that you're almost kind of going to partnership with these cities and counties. So I would encourage you to communicate with them and continue. They are educating, just like this is a university that educates people. We need to do that. We're here on the ground floor. We're the experts.
Question over here.
Yeah, a couple. First, how do you get involved is the first question. The second one as it relates to Measure M. What did you just say? I'm not sure. No disrespect. It's like, did you really say anything? I didn't.
Yeah, okay. So here's the deal.
Are you going to allow, they're going to be, you've got these 187 of which one, whatever is being used. Am I going to be able to get a license or a permit? And is it a permit or is it a license? You say you talked about tax, but how does that relate to someone that wants to get into the business?
I'll take it. Give Ariel a bit of a break here. Measure M is on the ballot March 7th. It's here in Los Angeles. It basically empowers the city of LA, the city council, to create a regulatory framework for licensing or permitting in the city of Los Angeles. The actual parameters or scope of what those regulations will look like is still TBD, to be determined. And stakeholders are currently meeting with City Council once a week here in LA, sort of helping to form that regulatory framework. So it's happening here in LA. If you haven't gotten involved or you don't know about it, give one of us your business card, and we both have like newsletters. And there's ample information out there about what's going on now through, Cannabis Task Force, Cultivators Alliance, SoCal Coalition, some of the statewide organizations who've really been pushing for the last year here in LA to get licensing. Now, you said a number, 187. Some people might not know what that means. There's a pre-ICO list out there, and it's actually currently 134. And that list is of businesses that have been around since before 2007. And those businesses enjoy a limited immunity under Proposition D, but they don't even have affirmative permits yet. That's all being folded in. How many shops are we going to have? How many grows are we going to have? Are we going to allow volatile, non-volatile? Distribution, that's all being sort of discussed. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't get involved and add your 2 cents, because your experience, your desire, the strength is in numbers, right? City Council wants to see who out there is actually in the cannabis industry, who wants to be in the cannabis industry. The stigma that is attached to the industry, is it true, is it not true? Are we going to get tax dollars? How are we going to, right? When we first started sitting down with City Council, maybe a year ago, 14 months ago, and we said, at the time, the MMRSA, and it just glazed over. There's a new law, statewide law, that just, no idea, right? So we've just been educated, because as much as this is our entire world, other people have other stuff going on, and they're just not paying attention, So it's really up to us, and it's an exciting time where we actually get to make a difference. We actually get to shape the policy that's moving forward. That being said, if, in the next 6 months, 9 months, years' time, those of you that are already operating are operating at risk. There's nothing that anybody can do for you unless you have a local permit. They can say you're 100% bulletproof, nothing's happening to you, because that's just not true. And those of you that are manufacturing with volatile substances are even more at risk, right? I was just talking to someone earlier who said, the LADA is really all about, cracking down on butane extraction, etc., because of the dangers that potentially are involved there, but they're also not maybe educated about the safe ways of doing that. So it's all a process, but if you are looking for a risk free enterprise, this is probably not where you want to be. I think it's really interesting to look at the pre-ICOs, because those pre-ICO businesses, they opened their doors in 2007 when there were DEA raids, when there were, they were really getting the brunt of prohibition, and they stayed open in defiance of the law because of something that they believed in. They were promised in 2007 that they were going to get some sort of licensing, some sort of permitting. They had to wait until 2013, 6 years, before they were granted a limited immunity, not even a license. That means for 6 years they were naked in the wind, just, defying the law for what they believed in. And so that's kind of where this industry is born out of, and something to always keep in mind. And then, you can consult with people to minimize the risk, to position yourself for licensing, all those good things. But nobody's going to say, hey, you're not going to get prosecuted at all. The good thing is, with Prop 64, most marijuana crimes are now a misdemeanor, which is great. Say what you will about Prop 64, you like it, you don't like it. Under the law, we walked into court, and, we were in court November 9th, and, was a felony, now it's a misdemeanor. Was 4 felonies, now it's 4 misdemeanors. That's a completely different conversation. So I think the decriminalization is huge under Prop 64. And there's so many exciting things happening there. But, to be here, the sort of benefit is you get to be at the ground level, grassroots. The cost is, you may get into some trouble. I mean, I have a client who says, if you haven't been arrested, then you haven't been doing this long, right? Because it happened, unfortunately. So you can tell your
So as you see, there is a lot of opportunity, and there are still some pitfalls and guidelines. I think one of the key things to pick up on is the felony to misdemeanor, which means that with Prop 64, as we have legalized in California, you can still go to jail, which is important to understand. So keep that in mind. There are certain limits, and if you exceed those limits, you can still be arrested. And that's important to understand when you think about the word legalization. You need to really understand what that means and what Prop 64 really represents in that sense. So what I want to do is I want to talk to Jeff. And as we're talking about a lot of these opportunities and what's happened in the past with rules and regulations and guidelines and the opportunity to start a business to where we are now with Prop 64 and MCRSA. So for somebody that's done this a long time ago, that's seen a lot of pitfalls, what are some of the challenges? What are some of the concerns? Are you happy with the progress that you're seeing right now? Are you optimistic in what the future holds for everybody that wants to start a business or a dispensary or a cultivation permit?
Yeah. For those that don't know me, I got sued in '98 under the Clinton administration by Janet Reno for dispensing on Broadway downtown Oakland medical patients before there was really acceptance of this issue. I am eagerly optimistic that we have a lot of great road ahead of us. We've come out of a dark hour where everybody that I knew could go to prison. Now I know people that are not going to prison for doing what I used to do and not getting in near as much trouble. That doesn't mean we're free from those problems. And as we see a new administration come in, you might want to look at my playbook and take one out of it. That we're going to get hit again, that we're going to get pushed down, and that we have to push back, that we have not gotten done with our struggle. I remember when we passed Prop 215, and I was one of the early adopters. I was already open on Broadway by the time 215 passed, already openly dispensing, before there was a state law to protect me. I remember talking to one of my staff members, and he's like, we won. And I'm like, you're right, we won, but we only won the right to debate this forward to actually prove what we've been saying is correct. We're still in the middle of that debate. We've got a lot more of a level playing field because we now have adult consumption around the corner. But that may be the new attack dog. And just because we may be medical doesn't mean we need to let those guys go to the gulag. I think we have to stand up for everybody. And I think, I was talking to Don Duncan and Asa earlier, where we've come from, we cannot forget because we will quickly replicate it if we don't understand the pitfalls that we came out of to try to avoid them. And I think there's just simple things we do. Compliance may be the most important thing coming up as the new administration takes over and Jeff Sessions potentially is our nominated confirmed Attorney General. I know how that arm of the DOJ works. It says we're going to evenly enforce the law. You don't get exemptions. There is no tolerance. It's about how you set up your local environment that you operate in. Remember, I was dispensing with support of the city of Oakland before there was a state law. after the federal government sued me, they finally decided to give me a permit. Okay, so there was some stepping that we had to necessarily draw it out first before we get to the point where we're at now, where now there's permits in Oakland. We have 8 dispensaries. One of them was, the landlord was sued, and that case was dismissed under forfeiture this year with prejudice, meaning the new DOJ just can't sue them for forfeiture again without something new involved. Those are big stepping points, but this is baby steps. This isn't a big leap, and I feel like we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we can't forget where we've come from. Even though it was a dark hour, and a lot of people are in this with an optimism that this is the next gold rush, what you might have to give up a little bit is your blood. I came from an era where it was a liberty that was on the line. Now we might just be renting a little blood. But you got to be willing to get scraped. You got to be willing to get back up the next day and do everything you're doing with a focus. Because if they rattle your cage and you are allowed to be rattled, they win. I made a living out of taking the lemonade bag and making lemonade stand out of it. I mean, they handed me something that I didn't know the precursors were, and I made them take that I wasn't going to give up. And we, I feel, have been a lot more victorious than we like to claim. We're not going to get a thank you. We're not going to get an I'm sorry. We're just going to get change of policy. And that's been my goal the whole time, is to get the policy shifted so that everybody here has an opportunity not to be a criminal. The fact that we passed Prop 64, I think, was the best stepping towards that direction. I've had friends that have had simple possession cases dismissed, sales cases that didn't exist because they've got a citation as a misdemeanor post Prop 64 passing. So it's already taken effect. And I think it's going to not make the police give up, but it's going to allow them to create a different narrative. When I started this, there wasn't a thing as medical cannabis. We created that new animal for us to discuss and base a whole industry off of. And I think we've been very successful at it. And we're not going to stop. Even if they come down very heavy-handed at the federal level, our state government might be the next government that gives us a permit. Remember what it took to get permits from my local government was the federal government to come down on us. And then when you saw Harborside get sued at the landlord level, my local government sued the Fed to try to stop it. I remember asking them in the 90s, will you sue the government? And they went, it's all right, Jeff. We know that they're attacking you, but this isn't our issue. We can't do that right now. My, how times have changed.
Do you have any questions for Jeff? A question or two? 1 or 2 questions? Right here in the front.
I have a question about staying medical for a topical, and would that be able to be sold to for adult use, or does it?
Likely they'll have to have a bifurcated permit. You need to qualify for it to be an adult market item. In Colorado, when the law first took effect, medical was able to be transferred into the adult marketplace under a one-time transfer, but after that there were separate pennies. So the medical marketplace has a different price per pound than the adult use marketplace in Colorado because there's 2 different tiers.
Right.
We may hybridize that. We don't know yet because these rules, these promulgated procedures that they're working on haven't been released, but it's up to us to affect them. So if that's what you want and that's what the room wants, let's get to work.
And you
because
said
we
that's
are going to be able
called
to affect.
bifurcating?
Well, they're 2 different tiers.
Yeah.
You have medical and adult. You can't trade the stock because they're tracked seed to consumer. If the consumer over here is adult, it has to come from an adult grow. It can't come from a medical grow unless there's a transfer that's allowable under the government.
And it just doesn't. It doesn't seem to make sense to stay medical because it's going to require a state.
What's your focus?
license.
I used to ask them, people come and say, I want to set up a dispensary a decade ago. I'm like, are you trying to make money or are you trying to help people? Because if you're trying to make money, you should back away quietly and not get yourself in trouble because it's probably going to cost you more. A local case is $25K. A federal case, I don't want to mention how much it costs. $250 just to start with. $250,000 to defend yourself federally. So if you're helping people medically, stay medical.
Yeah, but every single member we have now would actually have to have a state like a state doctor's recommendation. How hard is that going to be?
That's not true.
Yeah.
I think that the medical laws has not been touched. There may be some tweaks to what it takes to be medical, but we did not mandate the state card for medical. What the state card is mandated for is a sales tax exemption under Prop 64. So you get a sales tax exemption. You can
So
be
we're
medical
still
just with being a doctor's note holder.
They're not going to crack down on the doctor.
They may crack down on the doctor that writes the
Okay.
note, who's a specialist that doesn't know you. In some states, you have to have a 30-day or a 90-day interaction with the doctor before he can recommend to you.
I thought they were going to a state-regulated doctor recommendation, like it's all going to be state.
Maybe. I mean, we don't know what the regulations are. They're going to try to push down on what they consider to be the Wild West medical apparatus that's been out there that's kind of open-ended. But as we regulate, things are going to fall out. And do you think they really have time to chase doctors over marijuana's recommendations? They can't get them for writing a celebrities, opiate
Right.
scripts. They're going to have an issue there. It's going to take some time to weed that out. Part of the problem.
There is some language in Prop 64 about it sort of encourages a more, refined approach with the medical doctor. And it says that, after Jan 1, 2018, you have to get a new rec. But then it says, but if you don't get a new rec, it's okay. So it's like kind of, it's that kind of language that, it's kind of just, let's nod the issue, but let's not really put any Yeah, and then if you do get your state ID card, it's now $100, right? And is that gotten into effect, the $100? I don't know if it's Jan 1 or if it's in effect now. It's only $100 statewide. That's mandated. And then you don't have to pay sales tax, which is kind of awesome for you and your provider.
You actually touched on some of the differences, so I want to just ask the audience really quickly. Show of hands, raise your hand if you're from California. Okay, and we're going to make it easier. Raise your hand if you're from outside of California. Okay, good deal. So let me ask you this. Raise your hand, because we're touching back and forth on Prop 64, which is adult legalization, and MCRSA, which is medical. Raise your hand if you're very familiar with the MCRSA. Okay, so then can one of you take this question? And before I ask it, one of the mottos is, as we do a lot of trading, not just nationally, but internationally, as we advise a lot of foreign governments, and it's one of the things that Jeff touched on, is we've made a lot of mistakes. And so there's a great opportunity, especially from California, since we've been doing this for over 20 years, to still learn from our mistakes, whether you're an individual, whether you're a future entrepreneur, or somebody regulating a new enterprise in a foreign country. But what's the difference between Prop 64 and MCRSA? What's the difference, and what does it mean to future entrepreneurs? What are your challenges? Is it one better than the other? Can one provide more for the other? Is there a liability of one versus the other?
Yes, no. So many questions in there. Well, just like I'll give you the broad frameworks and then...
and any contradictions?
Yeah, so Prop 64 is adult use and MCRSA is medical. And the idea is that, whether you're a patient or you're not a patient, it is legal to possess up to an ounce of marijuana. You don't need to have a doctor's recommendation or anything like that. Now, as far as providing, and Ariel can touch on this, as far as providing to someone else, you cannot do that unless they are a medical patient for compensation until January 1st, 2018. So you can gift up to an ounce to any individual, but you cannot receive any compensation on the recreational side. On the medical side, you can still walk into a dispensary, but any dispensary that says, I saw this like on a Weed Maps advertisement, we are Prop 64 compliant, 21 and older, no rec required. That's totally illegal. That's a misdemeanor. To sell marijuana to someone who's not a medical patient is still a misdemeanor. So that's kind of the broad strokes. Prop 64 mostly dealt with adult use. It did try to refine some of the points under medical. I think now if you're a medical patient and someone requests your information, there's like a 10-day window that your information cannot be disclosed until you've been notified that someone's requesting your medical information. So that was like a greater protection for patients under Prop 64. Similarly, parental custody can no longer be denied solely on the basis of your status as a medical patient. So that was included in Prop 64. So there were some little points in Prop 64 about medical, but Prop 64 was mostly about adult use, mostly about recreational, making it legal for you to possess up to an ounce, but it is not yet legal to sell any amount of recreational marijuana under Prop 64, and that won't be available until Jan 1, 2018 or after. So that's kind of the broad strokes.
Cool. And when it comes to the business end of things, so obviously marijuana is being grown and sold in California right now. The way that it's being grown and sold in California right now is that it's basically a kind of self-regulated system. So operate within this nonprofit, collective, cooperative sort of model, particular corporate entity form, perhaps a nonprofit mutual benefit corporation or the like, maybe some associated entities. You pay your federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes. You have various sorts of internal agreements that show compliance. And so we've basically been in a situation where so long as you comply with the law, you have this limited immunity
kind of like a defense, and that's been very uncomfortable because we've not yet had any sort of state license. So essentially businesses are operating in this sort of like quasi-legal area. So working with cannabis businesses, we represent farmers, dispensary operators, delivery services, all facets of the cannabis industry across the state. But really, the underlying form is as a collective, and it's all it's a little dicey. It's hard to build a business when you don't have very few folks have local permits and no one has a state license. And so think about it like an alcohol kind of a model, or other industries that are very regulated. So what the medical MCRSA and AUMA did was it's creating a regulatory program around this kind of like crazy gray area sort of like quasi-legal industry that's been operating and thriving for 20 years, and will create a regulatory agency under the Department of Consumer Affairs. So the industry will be regulated, and also will be regulated by the Department of Consumer Affairs, by the Department of Food and Agriculture, because marijuana becomes an agricultural product, by the Department of Health. Right now, 16 plus state agencies, from water, environmental, across the board agencies promulgating rules and regulations that touch this industry, because these different agencies are tasked to deal with various things that deal with with the citizens within the state of California and touch upon this new emerging business. But it's in a very interesting thing, right? Because we have this industry that's been thriving, and now we're regulating it into particular categories of licensure: cultivation, dispensary, distribution, transportation, right? All these particular types of categories. So if you have a cultivation permit, you'll be able to sell to anyone who has a licensed dispensary. And that kind of provides the overarching framework. I would just say two things in terms of the differences between these two programs that are of note. Number one, under the MCRSA right now, there is a distribution level. The distributor license type is sort of the regulatory checkpoint or quasi-regulatory checkpoint that does quality assurance, lab testing, collects taxes, and must be third party. Under AUMA, that does not necessarily need to be third party, but I'll just there's a lot that goes into this conversation. But there will be quite an epic battle this coming year in Sacramento about all of these issues, which I'm sure some people are very well informed about. Then the second thing that I think it's important that everyone recognize is that in the AUMA, there's a Type 5 license, which will go into effect 2023, which is an unlimited cultivation canopy size. And as someone who works with small farmers, medium-sized farmers, and even larger scale farmers, this is potentially concerning. So I just want to throw that out there.
Awesome, thank you. And I just want to make a note before we open up to a few questions. As you're hearing the word adult a lot here today, but I'm sure that when you read your newspapers, you pay attention to the news, you hear the other word, recreational. You hear that a lot. And at Oaksterdam, we don't use the word recreational, and the reason being is as you're moving forward in this industry, we just had elections. But prior to elections, this makes a big deal, because a 14-year-old can use cannabis recreationally, but not if it's for adult use. And sometimes these little words make a big difference, and it can affect thousands of voters. So I just want to mention that to you. We have some questions here in the front. White shirt.
Thank you, by the way, for explaining some of the situation that I think that some of the people in this room are trying to transition from what's been a gray and black market area and trying to get ourselves up to date and whatnot. And there's a lot of confusion out there. Specifically for Southern California, LA, Orange County, can you recommend a couple of the better standing agencies, activists that we can start getting in contact with so we can start taking more of a hands-on approach as far as moving forward? Like, we're missing information. We're curious who it is that has this information, how it is that we start dialogue with these people. We want to get involved, we just don't know where to go.
Yeah. Well, I usually recommend some statewide organizations, and it kind of depends on what sort of aspect of the industry you're a part of. So there is California Growers Association. Out of California Growers Association, there's California Distribution. I don't remember. It's a new association that's just been created. There's also a California Manufacturers Association, California Cannabis Industry Association.
Down basically by the type of...
To some extent, yes. And so those are statewide organizations. And so it's important to kind of keep track of what's going on a state level. On a local level, in the city of Los Angeles, there's the Los Angeles Cannabis Task Force, LACannabisTaskForce.org. We send out a lot of good, just kind of like substantive information. There's Cultivators Alliance. There are a number of different local groups here in the city of LA. Then in LA County, there are different groups. Orange, I mean, you know, I don't mean to be difficult, but people could also email me and we can send you a list of folks at ADC at Clark Neubert, Neubert, Clark, my last name, and then my law partner's last name.com. But, you know, it's challenging because these organizations are being formed, and I certainly encourage people to form organizations. Sometimes they're local chapters of these statewide organizations, but access to information is a big thing. I mean, that's why it's awesome that you guys are all here, and why going to various sort of like networking events, meetup groups you see in your area, showing up and looking at it when your city or county has in there, like you can go online, information is accessible to us as citizens, and going online and saying, all right, when are they like looking for the word cannabis or marijuana and showing up at those. I mean, you know, there have been significant hearings in the past where, for example, in LA County, this is like a year and a half ago, they were discussing whether to ban, and like 5 people from our industry showed up, and like 50 people who were anti showed up. So guess where that went, you know? And so it's really incumbent upon us to actually show up and do, and that also, you know, using various sorts of Google alerts. I mean, I spend like my morning a good hour just reading what has happened today. All right, I understand what's going on so that I can give accurate advice, because that's my job to give that to you guys. And so, but we have to do a lot of it, and you have to do a fair amount yourselves. It's true.
I heard officially they're calling it cannabis now instead of marijuana. So is that true?
Well,
My initial plan worked. Marijuana has baggage, cannabis, who knows what it is?
Yeah.
And the reason there's some negative connotations, and one way to sometimes approach this or explain to somebody, this isn't necessarily correct, but I'm saying this just to get you to think a little bit, is marijuana is something that you smoke, and cannabis is something that you take. It's not necessarily the case, but if you can kind of understand the premise behind that, you'll kind of understand where I'm going. Let's take one more question before I want to just, this is your hand.
Yeah, my question is, how can I take advantage of Prop 64 and MR right now or in the future to open a business different than medical marijuana or dispensary or cultivation? For example, to open a cafe, can I include like MR or Prop 64 to come like collaborate with my other idea that I have, different than something to help people?
Well, are you going to be handling cannabis at the cafe, or are you serving space?
No, it
for
would
them to
be
use?
like in a tea form or like a cupcake or something.
If you're serving it, you'd have to be licensed,
Yeah.
because you're going to be in that bracket. Right now, if you're trying to set up for down the road, you have to get medically regulated. You want to be in the medical regulation because it will allow you to get to the next step. In states that allowed for medical regulation first, they kind of gave first dibs to those medical regulated folks to do the next step. You're safe, you're already kind of vetted. Have you made mistakes? Have you had complaints? You're likely to get the next permit. That's what's happening in Florida right now. The licensed growers that are there are now being expanded into the new initiative. So get in now and get involved and fit into that thing. And if you have a different expertise, try to merge it in. Just because we're seeing things develop one direction right now doesn't mean somebody else in the room doesn't have the next good idea that's going to change that direction.
What about the lounge talk you were saying? To his question, but what about the whole lounge law?
I don't want to say hang on, but it's going to be a long ride, and it's going to have some bumps, and we're not yet having the rules yet. So the lounge, the social use, is just arriving in Denver, in Colorado, that passed their adult use law in 2012 and then implemented it in 2014. It's 2017, and they're just getting to that. We're going to speed that up
and
a
it's
little bit.
2016 we passed Compassionate Use Act, or now it's 2017, and that was 20 years ago. You know, I mean, so there is time, but there's always this constant tension of like, do I wait until it's totally legit, or do I do it now? And that's something that you really need to think about, right? And that's a personal choice. Cannabis Cafe is a license under Prop 64. That exists. Does that mean it's going to be issued right away? We don't know that. I think there are some kind of like legal finesses you can put on certain business models. I mean, in like 2008, I would have people come to my office and be like, hey, I want to set up a marijuana business. And I'd be like, okay, well, there's the door, and I don't, you know, that's not something I do. But now, you know, it's so accepted, and there are products out that, like, you know, people would call me again in 2008, 2010. I'd be like, you guys are crazy thinking of these products, and they've made it a thing, and they've succeeded. And so now, like my clients who are business clients, I kind of tell them, that's a personal choice. These are the legalities. This is the situation. You have to make a personal choice.
But I have good news about the cafe, which is that, and this is why you should come if you're in the city of Los Angeles and participate in this open process where, for example, Council President Wesson has gotten really excited about the idea of cannabis cafes and people who want to have little like chocolatiers. And we are a city of like making really rad products and like really amazing brands. And we have like massive style in this city. And so he's kind of on fire about that. So get to those hearings, stand up and talk about these creative ideas because they're excited.
And folks, I want to mention that we are going to, most of us will try to stick around after class if you have any more questions. I'm used to, that's what I'm used to, okay? We're from a university, so we always stick around after class for being school, so we will stick around. You're going to get our business cards. We want to make sure that we answer all of your questions. I do want to talk about a couple things really quickly. Jeff and I had a conversation earlier, and I want our two fantastic attorneys to be able to have an opportunity to touch on this as well. Jeff and I had a conversation. We talked about California. Well, some of you are not from California, and you know what? Just because you're in California doesn't mean that all of your business will be here. Your partners may be from out of state. Some of your work may be out of state. You might do everything out of state. So what's happening on the national market? We know it's going to happen tonight. We have Jeff Sessions, our new Attorney General, in here. We have the Cole memo and so on and so forth. So based on our conversation and what might be changing with some of these rules and regulations, Jeff, can you give them some insight, please?
I don't want to speak legally, but as an advocate, I foresee us going back to a Nixonian law, where the rule of law is what you expect, and the law is that. There is no more tolerance at the federal level. And as I said, you'll want to pull one out of my playbook as to how to survive, because it might be tougher than it's been in the next year or two to get through this next phase. But that being said, we have to put pressure on it, because if Sessions rips up the Cole memo, we do not renew the Rohrabacher and Farr amendment in the House to the appropriations budget. Are we left hanging in the wind? Are our businesses that have put out their welcome mat going to want to pull it in? Maybe. This may be a spot where we see a ramped up enforcement, but it may not be after medical. It might be after adult use. They might try to block states that have just passed adult use from taking effect. We've already seen Massachusetts roll back their start date from January 2018 to now June 2018 under a new law that was signed by their governor. Our regulator was asking for the same. Now she's optimistic that if they merge the system, she can handle it. If they're two different systems, she may delay adult use, if it's not delayed by a court. So on the advocacy side, we might have a little bit of waiting time, but in the end, if we are correctly guiding it and pressuring it in the right direction, we're going to create opportunity for us. And if you speak up and get involved at the local meetings, you may not all be able to get to Sacramento, but you can affect things locally, and that's really where the change is going to come from to begin with.
The Rohrabacher Farr Amendment is huge. I mean, if that gets renewed, I think in April, then I would sort of exhale. But that is, that is something that is really important. So learn about that. That basically is an amendment that's been renewed 3 years in a row that defunds the DEA and the DOJ from prosecuting marijuana cases in states where it's legal. But, there's this kind of like strict compliance language in there that dangles. We've got a federal case that we're looking at where, now we're deciding, okay, whose burden is it to show that this federal defendant was in strict compliance with state law in order to, sort of make the Rohrabacher Farr Amendment active and enjoy the benefits of that. So that's like really huge, I think. I don't think, in my opinion, we can expect much progress at the federal level, but, if Rohrabacher Farr is renewed, I can kind of, sort of feel a little bit more at ease. So that's, because you have the branch of government, the judicial branch, which enforces that and which can protect us a little bit. But, I think that Jeff's absolutely right. Like, the next 4 years could be scary.
We do have to wrap it up soon, so do you have any other final comments that you want to make? Any best practices that you'd like to share with our guests here?
There's a question.
Is there a question there? Okay, in the pink shirt.
Yeah, you had mentioned about the ounce new legislation that you're allowed to give or have. Is that flower only? Is that extra? Does it matter if it's extract or wax or anything?
I think the gifting
I would
is,
say that it's legal possession. So in the Prop
Right.
64, it says you can have an ounce of flowers or
Right.
less without having a misdemeanor. I'd say 8 grams or less of concentrate or extract. And I don't know
Represents
what
my
about
gift,
food,
maybe.
because that's a different
Yeah.
version. It's maybe active constituents in the food, because they're getting into that level.
Does it say that in the legislation, 8 gram per
Yeah,
ton?
it says it.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, they enunciated it. It kind of tracked what happened in Oregon.
But be careful with that. Don't take that as a green light. Like, be careful with that. Don't couple it with some other promo item necessarily, and you get money. I mean,
Yeah.
you're getting money for this, but you're not getting money for this,
Yeah,
so
if
it
you
doesn't
put
count, right?
If you put it on Craigslist, you're giving away under an ounce.
Yeah.
You'd like a donation on the way out the door. You likely will get charged, but the charge will be a misdemeanor right now. There's this wedge that if we don't act too bad, we might be able to get them to build up more tolerance because we don't have a lot of loose ends that are causing us trouble. 1 or 2 bad apples can ruin it for a handful or a dozen good operators that are doing it right because they're all tainted with the same level of problem.
All right, folks, we are going to stick around after the panel. However, do you have any final comments, tips, or business practices you'd like to share before we wrap it up?
I'd just like to share with everyone, really, you're in the right place in terms of getting information. You're stewards of your business. We are here to help you. But ultimately, understanding what the laws are, where we're at in terms of politics, getting involved is really critical because really all of us together, we sort of create this future. Absolutely. So just one more thing is 100% making sure that your business is in compliance is really critical. How we face outward toward our local community is critical. We really are all on this ground floor, and let's build a really awesome house.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Any other final comments?
That was very well said. Compliance is key to the extent that you can comply. In sort of when I put my criminal defense hat on, a person who gets arrested or gets a ticket and they have no paperwork, no defense, no nothing, that's going to make my job much harder than if you actually have all the paperwork, right? And then, as a business attorney, I would advise my clients to, really use the Attorney General guidelines, really use your legal professionals to make sure that what you're doing is up to date, because this is part of the reason why I love this area of the law so much. It changes daily. Google alerts, like hundreds of them all day, every day. I mean, it's crazy. And then I've got these little brochures that are frequently asked questions if you guys want to come up and grab one. I brought a bunch.
The only thing I would add is that be ready for a bumpy ride, but coming from where I've been, the vision that I had of wanting to make a better day, I already feel successful. I don't think that they can roll back what we've done to change the way that medical patients get access to this, the fact that it's a discussed therapy now, and that we have the review of the IOM report that was just released in January. I was involved with the first one in '99. They actually came to my active dispensary, looked at me dispensing to patients, watched me hold the cannabis plant and said, is this plutonium? Is this really going to get people in that much trouble? They sure treat it that way federally. We haven't rolled back all that baggage, but we have created a different monster for them to deal with, and I don't think Sessions can stop us. And we have to kind of understand that and not be scared about what's ahead. Because if I was scared when I first got involved with this, I'd have never done it. I didn't think I was going to walk out of it a better man. But I feel like we are successfully walking out of this and creating a different paradigm for the rest of the world. Because so goes California, so goes the nation and the world.
Fantastic. And I'll wrap it up by saying this, folks. Just remember, if you want to move forward in this industry, and you do, that's why you're here, you will have to advocate for yourself.
We have cards.
Learn about the different methods of ingestion, learn about organizations such as LEAP.
So you said to be part of that email you?
Yeah, and I only have my political card, so it's not my law firm card.
I've got tattoos for you.
You know you're there and
Yeah, for sure. There you go.